of Shine in 2016. I'm your host and moderator for the series, and in the last few weeks, we focused on the way you can care for your body from the inside out. We had Diana Steele and Mandy King talking about all the ways you can eat and make better choices, and ways that you can shop in the grocery store to get the right foods. And we also had Dr. Leslie Ellis, who talked about how to focus in 5 steps, how to have greater focus in your life and be more embodied in your life. And today, this month of Valentine's, the month of the heart, I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Teesha Morgan, who is a sex therapist. Sex is one of my favorite topics with clients and with my friends and with my husband. So I'm so looking forward to hearing all of the details that around this really great topic of sex. And just to say, Dr. Teesha Morgan is also the co-author of a new book that she's written called Heads Up. So she'll be able to tell you about that as well. Just to tell you that when you're looking at in the stores, it's got a great big pink popsicle on the front. So give you an idea of what it's all about. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Teesha, welcome to the call today. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you. I feel honored to be here. It's my pleasure.
It's so great to take people through these whole, just everything about really bringing on good energy in 2016. And good energy, I believe also it starts with great sex. And so I'm just wondering, why did you become a sex therapist?
That's a really good question. I think it was one of those very interesting topics that regardless of the topic in general you brought up, and it would either go one of two ways. Either people would be really excited to talk about sex with you, or they would have questions or things like that, or they would recluse and totally, withdraw and be like, oh yeah, no, that's not something I want to talk about. And the people that reclused really drew me in because I wanted to know why. Maybe it was kind of a shameful topic for them, or I kind of wanted to open them up a little bit and examine. And the people that were really excited to have, to talk about sex, I very much wanted to connect with, and it was a great energy. So I just feel like it was one of those topics that drew me into, regardless if the response from people was excited or kind of pulled back. So yeah, I think it's a very unique topic.
Yeah, and I think, one of the signs of health is feeling free in all parts of our life. And there is, you mentioned shame, and it's so true, like with religion and culture and family learning, there can be a lot of shame around sex.
Oh, definitely. I think that's a big component of it. And like you say, with our culture or religion, depending on our upbringing, that can be a big part of if it's affecting you becoming a healthy, well-rounded sexual being, for sure.
Yeah. And for couples, actually, often your sex life is a symptom. If it's not going well, it can be a symptom that is sort of a first call. Have you noticed that with clients?
Yeah, oftentimes they'll come in and say, "Oh, we haven't been having sex, or we haven't been intimate in quite a long time," and that's kind of the symptom. It's the first thing often that goes. But then when you dig a little bit deeper in the layers of the onion, you realize there's probably a multitude of reasons why sex and intimacy isn't occurring. So important to look at those reasons and unearthing to help intimacy and reconnection.
So, what are the most challenging parts of your career as a sex therapist?
I think it's very challenging in general when somebody comes in and they've had a very tumultuous past, like a sexual abuse history, for instance, and hearing those things. I feel privileged that someone would be able to open up in a safe space to share those things with me of their past. But sometimes it can be very difficult to hear. You can never unhear things. So I think it's sometimes very difficult for me to hear those types of stories. And that can be a hard part of my job. But obviously there's many rewarding parts as well, or I wouldn't stick in it, but that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is tough, and there's lots in the research about secondary trauma. So you really, it's great that you are providing a safe space for people to be able to explore some of their histories. And you also mentioned, what's the best part of your career?
Oh, there's lots of those. I think watching those little light bulb moments that happen with clients, where you talking about something and you're getting a little deeper and then it just clicks for them. I think those are, to be a part of those moments is always wonderful. I think another good part is when you're normalizing for someone when they're coming in with so much shame or so much guilt, and then you're really telling them, you know, it's okay, actually, that's fairly normal that you're going through that. And you can just see the weight lift off their shoulders and release, and those are really good moments as well. I also love doing sex education within communities or pockets or schools, and I find that really high energy and fun and uplifting as well. So lots of good parts.
Yeah, it's really rewarding, huh? Just
Mhm.
the best. I wanted to ask you, so how do you help clients assess their expectations and their goals regarding intimacy?
Mm, good question. I think that it's very important to have the conversation regarding expectations and goals, because oftentimes we have a lot of unspoken ones, personally or within a relationship, or maybe that have developed over time within a relationship, and we're not giving voice to those, and that can be causing issues. And oftentimes the higher the expectation or goal and the lower the reality, so the greater distance between the two of them, usually the greater the unhappiness within our life or our sexual relationship in general. So giving voice to some of those things can help alleviate some of that pressure and can help us kind of tweak or twist the intimacy within a relationship. So oftentimes you hear things like unspoken goals and expectations are that, and you know, my partner has an orgasm, or I have an orgasm, or there's penetrative sex, or maybe my partner initiates, or I last a certain amount of time, or you know, all these sorts of things. And they're not often spoken, but they're just expected. And then if one or more of those don't happen, it's just like adding to the pile of sadness or thinking that you haven't met those goals, and you tend to withdraw from the partner.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you more about orgasm and the differences about, you know, men and women. Why is it easier for men to orgasm than it is typically for women? Or is that true? Is that a myth?
I think it's based in somewhat reality, but I think it's based on the fact that men can often orgasm from penetrative sex, whereas vast majority of women only have orgasms from clitoral stimulation versus penovaginal intercourse. Obviously, I'm using a heteronormative example, but it doesn't mean that women can't orgasm very easily. There's lots of women that can orgasm within seconds and have multitudes of orgasms, and there's men that suffer with delayed ejaculation, where they're having sex for hours at a time and are never able to ejaculate with a partner. So it can go both ways. It's not all just men, but I think it's mostly to do with anatomy on that side of things, for more difficult for women. And I think there's a lot more stigma around women and masturbation and self-exploration and pleasure. Men, it's kind of more widely accepted or talked about in a more, you know, a more casual way, that it's expected that they would. So they would learn about their bodies and how to pleasure themselves fairly early, and with less shame attached than often women do. So that can be a big component of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like, you know, some of the research around first experiences and how impactful that is for people in their sexual confidence. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that can be a big one. I think doing sexual histories with clients, not just your sexual history, but your genogram, your family of origin sort of things, can have impact on your sex life and your relationships. So if you had a very bad first experience, for instance, let's say you were a young boy and you really liked a girl, and you started to get together and your penis just didn't work. You weren't able to keep an erection, or you weren't able to have penetrative sex, and she shamed you for it, or she laughed at you, or she called you gay, or all of these sorts of things. That can carry a lot of hurt, a lot of shame moving throughout the years, and that slowly can increase things like performance anxiety, for instance, which really just increases the chances that's going to happen again. So it's this very vicious cycle. You know, we call it the negative feedback loop, but it can go around and around and really feed on that shame. So it is really important to kind of dig into the sexual histories, or the sexual timeline, as we call it, and see where those prominent moments have occurred in your life, both good and bad, and how that's affecting you personally in the moment and in your current relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting because then you can kind of go back, I guess, to that event and, you know, reframe it in a way that, well, you know, you were only such and such age, and I wonder what was going on for the partner, you know, feeling insecure possibly, and laughing out of, I don't know, insecurity.
Insecurity or embarrassment, or yeah, kind of going back, re-examining, re-evaluating, talking about it, for sure. I think important.
Yeah, great. So what is the most common block to sexual confidence for people?
Hmm. I think it can differ a little bit for men and women. Usually, men's confidence tend to lie with performance. So how their penis is working, how they're able to perform in that way, if they're able to give their partner an orgasm or not. I feel like women's confidence can often be linked to body image. So how they look naked in the dark, for instance, those sorts of things. But I think every single person's different, but often I hear those commonalities between men and women.
It's complex, isn't it? Because it is about feeling good in your body, and when you feel good in your body, then you are freer to be open. And in a
Mhm.
way, I guess I'm thinking about an author, Dr. Pat Love, who talks about a frame of people turning on by either sexy body or sexy mind. So the
Mhm.
idea of scripts and schemas. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, I mean, our brains are our largest sex organ. So if your mind's checked out, your body's checked out long ago, and your body hears everything your mind thinks. So it is very important to have your brain engaged. So I think that that's for men and for women, obviously. That's a big component of it. Sexy body, yes, we all like to look at someone that is, alluring and beautiful and healthy and those sorts of things. I mean, that's just even evolutionary imprinted into our brains. Plus, the healthier we are, obviously, it can lead to things like a higher libido, higher, sex drive, lower diabetes, lower erectile issues. So I think it works on a multitude of different capacities. But I think our sexual schemas is like a whole nother kind of ball of wax. There's a really great theory on sexual schemas, and it basically says that there's 4 different schemas, and it's called give, take, allow, and receive. And they said most people lie in one of these. So if you picture it like a quadrant, like a box, right? There's 4 of these. Most people lie in one quadrant. It doesn't mean that you can't migrate to other quadrants, as most people can do all 4 at some time or another. But most people would find the majority of their pleasure in one of these boxes. And they say, when sometimes you're becoming intimate with someone or you're having sex with someone and there's just fireworks, there's sparks, everything's working out, you just kind of fit together with that puzzle piece. There's chemistry. They say that's usually because you're lying in opposite sexual schemas. So you do fit together like a puzzle piece. It works. And then sometimes you might get together with someone and it's kind of awkward. It's not really fitting together. There's not really, the chemistry isn't there. And they said oftentimes it's because you're trying to lie in the same quadrant or not complementary quadrants. So that's not why it's not working. So for example, if someone is a giver by nature, that means they would find the most sexual pleasure out of giving their partner pleasure and watching their partner experience pleasure. So I'm going to use a heteronormative example again, but let's say there's a man and he's going down on a woman. He's performing oral sex. And let's say she's being very flamboyant with her love of this. She's having multiple orgasms. She's throwing pillows. She's having a great time, right? Now, regardless if they have penetrative sex, regardless if he has an orgasm or he even has an erection, he's going to view this situation as something very pleasurable, very wonderful. He's loving it. Now, if she is a receiver by nature, she's also going to view this sexual encounter as something incredibly wonderful. So they have chemistry. They're fitting together. Now, if we take this woman out and we replace her with another woman, let's say a woman who is also a giver by nature. So he is performing oral sex, and maybe she's laying there going, oh God, he's been down there for a while. Do I look fat in this light? Did I remember to call my sister? When is the last time I changed these sheets? How long is he going to be down there? She's just not really engaged. She's not into it necessarily. So now she wants to flip. So she wants to switch the roles because she's a giver. So maybe she starts performing oral sex on him. Now he's laying there going, oh gosh, I hope I don't lose my erection. Oh gosh, I hope I don't lose my erection. Because he just wants to be in the driver's seat. He wants to change it up. So it doesn't really necessarily matter the technique on either parties. They could be wonderful on both sides. But if their sexual schemas are different, they may not fit together in the same or the right way. So I think schemas is a whole ball of wax that you can really, in sex therapy, you can really dig into and kind of unearth to find out if your schemas are complementary, and if they're not, how can we twist those to make them work for you and for your relationship? Does that make sense? I feel like
Yeah,
that was
that
yeah.
totally makes sense. And I'm just sort of wondering, so if you had clients who were both givers, how would you work with them? What would you say as a, as a tool or homework for them?
I would say, yeah, the first part is recognizing which quadrant you typically lie in is important, and then what your partner lies in. And then if you are in the same quadrant, then to say, okay, if you know that your partner gets the most pleasure out of one region, is it possible for you to have a night where it's more about them? So maybe you're migrating to a different quadrant for your partner's pleasure because you know that they want to be a giver. So it's not that you're maybe not enjoying sex, but you're realizing that this is kind of for them, and they would do the same for you. Or if there's a man that's having erectile issues, for instance, if he is, let's say, a giver by nature, if he starts out giving versus his partner giving to him, he's more likely to be able to get an erection so that they'll be able to have penetrative sex afterwards, versus him having anxiety about not being able to sustain or keep an erection during sex, and then both partners wondering what's happening or what's going wrong. So it can also be a tool when certain things come up, like erectile dysfunction, for instance, to know how to use that to your advantage by just switching the roles to make sure that the body works in conjunction.
And speaking of erectile dysfunction, sometimes that happens, right? And so it's important, I guess, for clients not to get so hung up if there is an event where, there is, loss of erection, and to be able to be connected in that experience together, like laugh it off, keep it light, and know that sometimes those things are about fatigue and stuff, right? Isn't it about fatigue or having too much, as you talk about your head, being in charge of the body? So
yeah,
say more.
it can definitely be more about the mental capacity rather than the physical. I mean, there's many physical causes from it, everything from the medication you're taking to your blood pressure to how much you may be riding a bike. I mean, there could be a lot of things that could be causing the erectile dysfunction. But yeah, oftentimes by the time clients come see me, it's usually a psychological issue. So yeah, it's kind of unpacking the performance anxiety, unpacking the expectations and goals that we kind of discussed, and seeing how that plays out in the relationship, and normalizing. Because I think oftentimes, if you look on TV, Viagra, Cialis, all those commercials are usually pushed towards men in their 50s, for instance, on TV, whereas a large majority of my clients are in their 20s and 30s coming to me with those issues and saying, well, obviously there's something really wrong with me because I'm not 50, but I need Viagra. So it's kind of, again, the normalizing and the saying, well, it's probably psychological, and how can we unpack that so that you don't have to take those kind of medications?
Yeah, and cycling, by the way, you mentioned cycling there, and I just it's become a really popular sport here in Vancouver and as well in other parts of the world. And what is the impact of cycling on people sexually?
I think that you have to cycle quite a lot for there to be repercussions. For men, I'm mostly pushing towards. It's important that you always get a bike seat that has that hole in the center of it, because if you don't have this hole in the center of the bike seat, then you're putting a lot of your weight on your perineum, and your perineum is the space between the anus and the testicles. And it's kind of almost like the root or base of the penis, for lack of a better way to explain it. So if you're continuing to ride for a long period of time, that area can become numb, and it can kill some of those nerve endings a little bit, which can affect your erections. So, but again, this would be somebody that would be bike riding a lot, but it could definitely be a component of affecting their abilities for sure.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's so interesting, like how psychological sex is too, and just that how important it is to give positive affirmation. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think it's intimacy is one of the places where we're extremely raw and we're extremely vulnerable. Not only are we generally naked in the in the physical sense, but oftentimes in the emotional or psychological sense as well. So any little indication that we are bad, that we're wrong, that we're not doing something right, that we're ugly, we're not desirable, any of those sorts of things start to come up, then it really hits home, I find, for people, because we are so vulnerable and raw in those situations. So I always say more than enough positive affirmation in all capacities of sexuality is very important. We often talk about the sandwich technique as well, you know, so it's when there's something that you want to see change within a relationship in the sexual light, you would start with something positive, then you would increase something that you would like to see change, and then you end with something positive. And that's kind of a good way to frame things when you're talking to your partner about sex and sexuality, because it can hurt so much, I think.
And you know, I think that's so important what you're saying, because it's kind of kind, right? It's I think remembering that we're making love, you know, not just I mean, I guess sometimes it's, you know, not, it's just fucking. Ah!
But yes, sometimes it's not making love. It's more
pushing. Anyway, but you know, just what about that though? Just that sense of, yeah, being caring, right? And it's an expression of love. And so that really fits into your sandwich method that you're talking about, and having those conversations and remembering that this is a vulnerability, and sort of feeling really, you know, kind of aware of that.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, one, being aware of it, and two, is if your partner's love language is words of affirmation, which I don't know if everybody's heard of the love languages, but there's a man, Dr. Gary Chapman, and he's a world-renowned psychologist out of the States. And after seeing countless couples, he comes up with this theory that there's, you know, 5 predominant love languages. It doesn't mean we're all one and none of the others, but we're usually a top 1 or 2. And he says it's pretty rare that we meet or end up with a partner that speaks the same language that we do. But when we learn our partner's love language and learn to speak it, and vice versa, both partners can report higher degrees of sexual satisfaction, overall love, commitment, and happiness within the relationship. So the love languages, the first one's physical touch. So that's hand holding, kissing, massages, sex, all of those things. The second one is words of affirmation. So that's, I love you, I need you, I appreciate you, you're so beautiful, thank you. The third one is acts of service. So whatever I can do for you to show you that I love you. Clean the house, take out the trash, fix your car. The fourth one is quality time. So it's not the quantity of time you're together, because you can, you know, sit and stare at a TV, but the quality of that conversation or activity. And then the last one is gifts. It doesn't have to be big lavish things, but just kind of little presents to let your partner know that you're thinking about them. So if your partner's primary love language is words of affirmation, then it would be very important for you to lay on the affirmation. I'm not saying lie, but I'm saying lay on the affirmations about how beautiful they are in bed, or how amazing they look, or how talented they are, or how sexy, or, you know, how good they are at what they do, whatever it is, because that's going to hit home for them a lot harder. It's going to fill up their love tank a lot more than if somebody's language isn't affirmation. But I think it's important for everybody.
I know, and it's interesting, you know, we think those thoughts quite often, you know, about just generally about our partners or just about people. We just tend to not say it. I just don't understand why, you know. So it's so important what you just mentioned. And in a way, the 5 love languages is a bit like your, you know, kind of construct about give, take, allow, and receive, whether you are, which quadrant you're in. You could almost write your own book, another book, Teesha, about that, you know, call it give, take, allow, receive. What are you? You know, but it helps having a framework to really kind of think in terms of possibility rather than pathology. And, you know, so I love what you're reminding us all about. And so let's just talk a little bit more about physicality. You know, there's lots of myths about penis size. And how important is penis size, really?
I get that question a lot. I think that in general, most women that I've talked to, again, that's kind of heteronormative, but most women I talk to that are really satisfied with their sex life often talk about their partner's abilities rather than the size of their penis. So how good of a lover are they? How much attention are they putting towards foreplay? Are they, you know, giving their partner oral sex? Are they gentle? Can they be fast and hard as well, as opposed to just lovemaking? Are they good with their hands? Are they good with their mouth? Can they make eye contact during sex? These are the things that I hear over and over again. It's not, wow, my partner's penis is really big, therefore our sex life is great. Like those two are very rarely, you know, connected when I'm hearing people talk about sex, intimacy, and really fulfilling or passionate sex. So I think so much emphasis is put on size, especially within our society, and I really think it should not be. Plus, there's only feeling in the first few inches of the vagina. So technically, if you're talking about G-spot orgasms, the penis would only need to be a few inches to actually reach that. That being said, I know different women prefer different sizes and different depths. I think generally for men, I tell them when they're anxious, so they think that maybe they're not large enough, often because they're watching mainstream pornography, which tends to have larger than average males, is that I would say you go to the bathroom, and after you've used up the roll of toilet paper, so it's just the, you know, recyclable piece, you would get yourself erect, and then once your penis is fully erect, you would slide on the toilet paper roll. So if you are the same length of the toilet paper roll, then you're of average length, and if you can slide it on, you're the same circumference or girth, then you're of average girth. So yeah, I think sometimes that can help men as far as like, oh, that's what's the actual average versus like what I'm seeing on mainstream, I guess, pornography or TV in general. It can help with the normalizing.
Wow, that's such a great, you know, way of helping a guy who is worried about his penis size. The toilet paper trick.
The toilet paper trick, yeah.
So, you know, so when you're, you know, mentioning also about the sort of sensuality of the relationship, and, you know, people, for a man who is really in touch with his body, I'm thinking of Leslie Ellis's, you know, in our second week of this Shine in 2016 series, she talked about being in our bodies, and I can see how this would fit into being, you know, really having a pleasurable experience, a really embodied experience with your partner. It's so important to practice something that gets you into your body first. And I've heard this about it taking a little bit longer for women to, you know, turn the brain on, 20 minutes or something like that. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, they say that most women on average would prefer 22 minutes of warm up or foreplay before penetration. Now, that's obviously not every single time you have sex, and that's not every single woman. Obviously, that varies, but on average, that's kind of the statistic. They say that women can need a little bit more time in the warm up area because sometimes we can be too cerebral and we're spiraling in here, and we have a to-do list that needs to be all checked off before we can, you know, mentally be in with our partner and engaged. So I often hear from women, for instance, that are pre-orgasmic, so they've been having trouble reaching orgasm or have never had an orgasm, that yes, they are too cerebral, so they're not in their body enough. They're thinking too much in their brain, and that's causing that disconnect between body and brain and for an orgasm and able to occur. So it's oftentimes saying, how can we shut off the outside noise and bring it present in our body? I often tell men and women, because men as well can spiral, especially we talked about that negative feedback loop, is to really focus on the five senses. So in the moment, if you notice your mind wandering, then it's, okay, can I bring it back to the present? You know, what does my partner smell like? Like literally taking a smell of their hair. What do they taste like if you kiss one area of their body versus another? What's the tactile stimulations on your fingertips? You know, what are you noticing any noise? Are they moaning, etc.? So you can really start to bring it back into the body, into the feeling in the present moment, as opposed to drifting off other places. Because like I said, the brain's the largest sex organ. So if it's checked out, your body's gone.
So, you know, let's explore the senses just a little bit more. When you think about the sense of smell, I've heard that there's certain smells that actually are erotic. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, actually, in my book, we did a study, or we looked at a study that looked at penile blood increase with smells. So they found that lavender and pumpkin tends to increase penile blood flow by about 40%. Mind blown, right? So yeah, so I tease my clients, like, oh, you know, if they're having some trouble with erectile dysfunction, just make sure there's a pumpkin pie bacon in the oven and spray some lavender all over yourself and you'll be good to go. I know it's obviously not that easy, but yeah, there's different smells that can actually help with with your senses and your sexuality versus others, obviously, such as unsightly smells, which nobody really loves. Cleanliness is so important.
I can hardly wait to read your book, Heads Up. It's out in the, it's available now, I understand, and looking
Yeah.
forward to reading that. And I wanted to ask you as well then, what about, let's move through the senses actually, and what about, what creates a great environment in the bedroom? Like what makes a sort of sexy bedroom? What
Uh, I think
thinking?
that's a really good question because I don't think a lot of people put enough thought towards it. It's like if you go to work every single day and your office is stacks of papers and it's cluttered and you have somebody screaming in your ear over here and the sun blaring in your eyes and you know your TV or your computer screen is all off, then you're probably not going to be very effective in your work environment. So it's important we don't often look at our bedrooms in the same way. We walk into our bedrooms and there are, you know, there are computers over there with work-related things, or there's a diaper change table, or, you know, there's just stacks of dirty clothes on the side and one bright light in the top of above our bed. And that does not create the kind of ambiance or feeling that you want to evoke for intimacy. So it's really looking at your bedroom and saying, you know, can the lighting be different? Do we need to take life and life stressors out of the bedroom? What are those? Are there electronics in here? Are there kids' toys in here? What is it? How can we create a space where we walk in and shut the door and it's about us? It's about connecting. It's about like decompressing and relaxing. It's not a reminder of everything else around us. So what is that comfortable space? Because I think it's important.
Yeah, and you know, with the sleep research too, it's really neutral colors that you know actually help you feel calm. So I guess it's whatever makes you feel kind of calm and embodied. And you know, I always think of that movie, Meet the Fockers, you know, and and they actually really prioritized their sex life. There was a cowboy hat on the door so the kids would know not to go into the room when the cowboy hat's there. I just, you know, I love the lightness of the movie in that way, but also there's something about being intentional, you know, that you're actually being intentional that your sex life is important to you. And so the cowboy hat or whatever, you know, some people light a candle to say, okay, it's tonight, or but once you have kids, life gets complex. So how do you coach clients through that?
Oh, yes, the children. I think it's obviously difficult, especially if there's newborns in the picture or very young children. I mean, to tell new parents that they should be, you know, going on a date every single week and just leaving the kid. And most of them, all they want to do is sleep. They're absolutely exhausted. So I think normalizing that the sex life is going to be maybe not stellar in the first little while of, you know, with children coming into the picture, and that's okay, and that's normal, and to give yourself a break, that's good. After a while, though, you know, the sleep starts coming back, and then, you know, action expresses priority. So if your sex life is a priority, if your partner is a priority, then you really have to schedule it. And when I say schedule it, it doesn't mean, okay, I have to schedule sex at Friday at 4:15, let's go, because I know a lot of people that kind of rubs them the wrong way, but it's really scheduling time for your partner. So away from children, away from friends and family. I usually make my clients go through a date night kind of thing with them. I make all of my clients do the date nights, but within a set of rules. The rules is that there's a minimum of 2 per month. So that's only 1 every 2 weeks. You take turns planning the date. So you only have to plan 1 a month, which is not a lot to ask of anyone. That there's no friends, family, or children on the date. It's about the two of you and stoking that intimate quality time. And that there's no electronics of any kind. So you don't go to a movie, you don't watch a movie, there's no TV, no cell phones out. It doesn't have to be spending a lot of money, but it is about reconnecting. So I have a couple that puts a tent in their backyard and they do urban camping and they only go in the house to pee for the whole weekend. I have another couple that takes all the board games, all of their children's board games in the house, and they'll play like Monopoly for sexual favors, you know, like I'll give you Boardwalk for a 45-minute massage. So it doesn't have to be throwing money at the problem, but it does have to be prioritizing the partner over the children, which I think can be a really difficult thing for most people to do because their life and their world is those little kids, and they forget that the core foundation of the relationship is your partner, and it is that relationship. And if you don't put time and attention and intimacy to that, then those roots crumble and the whole house falls down. So I think it's important to do.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
as we're talking about that, it's also bringing up this idea that relationships have phases, right? So in stage one, it's, all, hormones and, the elixir of dopamine is just, love, and it's all exciting and there's lots of chemistry. And then typically couples go into stage two, which is, maybe some of the doldrums start happening. And so it's so important to create novelty in the, as relationships move into the stage one, stage two.
Mhm.
And so, what you're saying is novelty, like, make love in different places too. And I love the tent idea. And so do you talk about novelty with, like, all the brain research around how important that is to stimulate dopamine?
Mhm. Oh, definitely. I think also I usually recommend with the date nights that they make the date a surprise to their partner to the best of their abilities, meaning that they know it's Friday at 7, so they don't book something else with someone else. But the actual events of the date are a surprise. The reason we recommend that is because, like you say, when you move from stage 1 to stage 2, you often lose those butterflies, that excitement kind of feeling of like, oh, I'm going to see my partner and this is what we're going to do. And the oxytocin's flying and the dopamine and the serotonin, all these wonderful things. But if you don't know what you're doing for that evening, then that kind of nervousness butterflies start to, come into the body a little bit. And then there's that connotation of your partner with that nervousness or those butterflies. And it can help with that, not only novelty because you're doing something different, you don't know what you're doing, but the fact that it has that kind of, false excitement that's attaching to the partner in those, at least twice a month. So I agree. I think that's important. And the novelty, doing new things is so important. Inside and outside the bedroom. It's not just within the sheets.
Yeah, and how important it is to actually, attend to your sex life within the relationship too, because of the dopamine, or sorry, because of the oxytocin, which
Mhm.
is the attachment hormone. It's preventative for relationships to stay together.
Mhm. 100%. The
And
cuddle hormone.
yeah, especially as life gets more complex with kids and what have you, it's really, that is so important to have that intention. So yeah, and I'm just sort of wondering as well about food that we eat. Is there certain foods that we can eat to increase our sexual desire? Is it true
Mm.
about oysters and
The aphrodisiacs. Yeah.
ginseng or
I read a book on aphrodisiacs one time, and I found it to be kind of floofy in the science. Not a pseudoscience, but oftentimes you would have to consume large quantities of any food for it generally to all of a sudden just send a shockwave of boost or libido through your body. They say things like oysters and those sorts of things. I think in general, the book spoke a lot to the importance of like B vitamins and things for like energy. So for instance, if you're a vegetarian and your iron is low and your B12 and your other vitamins are low, the chances that you're going to have enough energy to have a high libido at the end of the day are going to decrease dramatically. So eating certain foods can give you that shot of like B vitamins to be like, oh, like I actually have energy, I'm feeling kind of good. And sometimes that can be often be interpreted as like, oh, that food gave me libido, So I think it's more so on those lines than anything. But yeah, I haven't found anything yet. I don't think the world has yet, or else that food would be extinct, I'm sure, in a week or two.
yeah. Well, that's so interesting. So B vitamins and feeling good in your body, I guess, too, has something to do with exercise. How important is that for setting up for a sex date?
Very important. So like you said, healthy diet, healthy body, healthy mind. If you're not exercising, if you have a very poor diet, for instance, then things like your libido, your energy levels, your drive, all of that are going to decrease significantly. So yes, if somebody comes in, whether a man or a woman, and says, I'm suffering with low libido, I don't have the energy to have sex with my partner, there must be something wrong with me. You're very important to look at it from a holistic place and say, okay, what else is going on in your life? And how often are you going to the gym? Where is your me time? How much stress do you have in your life? How good is your diet? I think it's very important to come at it from multiple different angles.
Yeah, yeah, and just mentioning as well about hormones. What kind of role does testosterone play in feeling sexual?
Very much so, especially for men. So oftentimes if men will come in and say that they have a low libido or no desire, usually step one is to send them to a GP and get a full gamut workup of their hormones and vitamins and minerals, because often their testosterone is quite low. That's not to say that that's 100% the root cause of it. There could be many things, from relationship issues to a multitude of things, but that's a very important thing to check out, because it could be as simple as taking some testosterone cream or injections or those sorts of things and boosting it up to of a more kind of normal or stable place. Yeah.
Okay, great. And what about Viagra? When would you suggest, if somebody was having erectile dysfunction, when would you get them on Viagra?
I think that Viagra, Cialis, Levitra, that whole route is kind of a personal choice for most people. I usually say these are all the tools in my toolkit, and I will give you everything that I have, everything I can, and you decide what's right for you. So I often talk about the fact that, Viagra can be more fast acting, so it'll kind of peak and then exit the body slower, whereas something like Cialis will be longer lasting, so it takes longer to peak, but it'll stay in the body for longer, but affects men in different ways. So oftentimes I'll say, see what one is right for you. Usually you don't start with a full tab, you would start with a half tab or a quarter tab, depending on the person and the age. And I often say it can be a tool that you can use in conjunction with other things. So instead of relying strictly on the Viagra to make sure that your penis works in a situation, oftentimes men will say, okay, I'm going to take a full tab of Viagra and I'm going to have success. And then I'll say, okay, now let's go down to maybe a half tab of Viagra and let's use something else. Let's work on our cognitive behavioral techniques. Maybe you're using a cock ring in the process and that's helping with things. Then you have success. Now you go down to a quarter tab of, let's say, the Viagra, but you're still using the techniques and the cock ring. Then you're going down to no Viagra, but the cock rings and the technique. Then you're going down just to the cognitive behavioral techniques. So it can be as a stepping process throughout and an aid versus something that you need to rely on long term.
And can you explain a cock ring? What is that?
Yes, so a cock ring looks like a rubber band. It's just a circular kind of thing. And it usually lies in one of two categories. One is pleasure and one is function or purpose. So the pleasure component, men can find that sometimes it can provide them with greater orgasms or better orgasms. And that's oftentimes they'll put the cock ring not just at the base of the penis, but they'll put the testicles inside it as well. And then the purpose function of the cock ring is basically the only job of the cock ring is to hold the blood in the penis. So once a man would have a firm erection that he's happy with, he would stretch the cock ring and he would place it at the base of the penis. If you could roll the cock ring down like you would a condom, it's far too big and it's not working for you. So if it causes your penis to go blue or purple, then it's far too small and it's not working for you either. So they say that it's one size fits all, but it's not. So I usually say get a pack of like 3 or 4 different sizes. But yeah, you stretch the cock ring, you put it at the base of your penis, and then basically if the man's mind starts going to a negative place, or he starts getting performance anxiety or nervousness or whatever it may be, the cock ring is like his best friend. It's like an all-natural Viagra. Its only job is to hold the blood in there, and then even if he goes to a bad place mentally, the penis is still hard enough to have penetrative sex. So he's getting, he's pleasuring himself, he's pleasuring his partner, and he's not worried about losing that erection. So it's a very good aid.
Okay, great. And for women, how does life stage impact with, changes in progesterone and estrogen? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes when women are premenopausal or going through menopause, for instance, and sometimes before, when pregnancy occurs or after pregnancy, anytime that the hormones are really variant, that can affect a woman's drive, their desire. It can, for pregnancy, it can increase it or it can decrease it. For menopause, it usually decreases it, or premenopausal. Not only that, but it affects the amount of lubrication that a woman has or how much she produces. So it can take a woman longer to produce the same amount of natural lubricant that her body would in the past. So oftentimes people come in and they say, I'm turned on, I really want to have sex with my partner, I'm mentally there, and you tell me it's all mental and I'm there, but now my body's not responding and it's hurting and it's causing pain and we're after using way more lubricant, and it's just a natural progression of the female body over time. So it's really understanding that, realizing that the foreplay has to increase even more as you age to give your body time to respond. But of course, the industry gives us tips and tricks. I mean, there's insertable lubricants now that women can use. So they're like little tablets, almost like if you were going to have a yeast infection and you insert the little yeast infection tablet. It's the same thing, but you insert the tablet and it lubricates the woman's body from the inside out. So it can be something you insert first, and then you go about your day, you have your date night, whatever it may be, and then when you're ready to have sex and the body starts going, then it lubricates from the inside out and it feels more natural. But if people don't like using insertables or more chemicals, you can use natural things. You can use coconut oil, for instance, and that works really great. But importance of lubricant, I can't stress enough.
And I just have to add, you know, coconut oil is also good to add to your shakes, so you can actually use it from morning to night.
And you can put it on your face, it's good for your skin.
It was a topic of discussion actually with Mandy King last week, and just how good that is for you, coconut oil. So, you know, we bring it to the bedroom as well. Teesha, I wanted to ask you, you know, what about how does women's cycle play out? You know, their menses, their period. How does that impact them in terms of sexual desire?
I think that's a really good question and can be a loaded question. I think when you look at studies of women and who they're attracted to, for instance, women tend to be attracted to more feminine features. And again, I'm going to use a heteronormative male-female. So if we're looking at a female looking at a man, if he has more feminine features, for instance, she'll be attracted to him for more of the days of the month. But then once she starts ovulating, she becomes more attracted to more manlier, quote unquote, men with stronger jaws or more beard or those sorts of things. It can also affect a woman's desire and drive. So they say there's about a 2 to 3 day window where it's almost like the body's way of saying, sperm please, like I would like penetrative sex, and that's usually to do with ovulation. And they said oftentimes women will fantasize about other things such as foreplay or being with another woman or these sorts of things, but then in that 2 to 3 day kind of ovulation window, all of a sudden it'll be penetrative sex that they would want or need. So it's amazing kind of what's going on behind the, you know, behind our consciousness that's driving what we want or need in the bedroom.
So that makes sense, actually. So during ovulation, of course, we're wanting to make babies. So we just, you know, give it to me, baby.
Pretty much.
And other times you want somebody who to hold you tenderly and, you know, to be held. And I just have to notice that your boyfriend has a beard. So you got it all.
He does. Beard. He's tender, sensitive, and he's manly with a beard. I lucked out. I did.
That's great. So, so that's interesting how our bodies actually are tuned in to procreate, right? And so part of that is feeling loved, connected, and producing, continuing our species, right?
100%.
Good. Yeah. Okay. So just backing up, earlier you'd mentioned something about G-spots, and I think there's still some, you know, question for some people about G-spots. Can you talk about the G-spot for man and the G-spot for woman?
Sure. So the G-spot for a woman is about, we say 2 fingers in or a couple inches in. And if a woman was lying on her back where her navel was facing upwards, then it would be 2 fingers in and it would be a come here motion, kind of like this. And that would be about where the G-spot would be located. So men that have a curvature to their penis, or vibrators or dildos that are curved on the end, that would be why, because it's trying to hit that curved spot. Some people say that they can feel kind of a ledge there. Other people say they can't feel anything. A lot of women try or aspire to find the spot, as do men, and they never truly succeed in it. Others can find it easily. It can be a tricky little thing to find. But I think it depends as well. Oftentimes when a woman has a G-spot orgasm, they will release more lubricant than if they have a clitoral orgasm. Maybe they would release less lubricant. So there's a finicky kind of place in there. There's also the A-spot and the U-spot orgasm for women, and those tend to be on either side of the cervical opening. Those can be trickier to find. So not to get discouraged if you're having trouble there. If you're having penetrative sex, or you're using a vibrator or a dildo and it's hitting and hurting, then obviously it's usually because you're hitting the cervix versus the one side or the other where the spots would be. For men, their G-spot is up the anus, so it's where the prostate is. So it's basically tickling the prostate, but it's about as far in as the females as well. It can be a come here, hither motion to stimulate that, and you can often feel something versus a woman. Sometimes you can't feel anything, but sometimes for a man it can be more like a walnut feeling for their G-spot.
Good. And so I can see, why a vibrator is so great, because you can actually reach those spots, or, increase stimulation. As you're talking about the A spot and was it the C spot?
U spot.
A spot, U spot. Thank you. Can someone actually overuse a vibrator?
I get that question a lot from women. I think that in general, research hasn't shown that you can overuse a vibrator. So if you're finding that the only way that you're orgasming is with a vibrator, let's say with clitoral stimulation, and that's the only way you can climax, then that's fine. And it's okay to bring that into the bedroom with your partner or with your alone, whatever's kind of helping you get to that climax or to experience that with yourself or with your partner. And that's all good and fine. As far as overusing it, if you found that you were reaching orgasm in other ways, and then you were like, oh, but I really love this Hitachi, and then you put all of your efforts towards this, and now you're finding that you can't reach orgasm in other ways, then decreasing the use of one to increase the use in other areas might be a good idea. But generally, I don't hear that from women. I hear that it's usually just one directional because of the vibrator, and that's fine. I don't think you can overuse it. But if your body's gotten used to like a high vibrator, a high stimulation on the clitoris, it might be hard for your partner to replicate that with his hands or with his penis. So he might have to use the vibrator. And again, that's okay, and it's actually fairly normal, just normalizing that and having that talk that usually you need high intensity stimulation in order to get there, and the vibrator provides that versus the penis or hands or whatever it may be. And again, that's okay, and that's normal. You're not gonna hurt yourself or make your, have problems with your clitoris moving forward, or your clitoral hood.
And do you ever find that with clients, that for some men they get intimidated by vibrator coming into the bedroom?
Some men, I've heard, can be intimidated by that or would prefer not to happen. But in honesty, the vast majority of men that I talk to are just happy that their partner is having pleasure, or that they're able to help them reach orgasm, and whatever their partner needs to get there is great. So sometimes they'll bring it in the beginning, or they'll bring it in after, or at some point versus the entire time. And most men I hear are fairly okay with that, as long as they're able to kind of help in the process or watch their partner have pleasure.
Okay, great. Yeah, good. And so, okay, let's just imagine that you're working with a couple, and one part of the couple is really dissatisfied with frequency. So, it's really, their sex life is, actually, first of all, what is the average amount of frequency for most couples?
Tricky question. I think they say in the in the initial stages of a relationship, so we call that the honeymoon stage or the limerence stage. Excuse me. And the limerence stage is most often the first 3 months to 3 years of a relationship. The frequency is going to be much higher then. So that's not usually a good meter stick of which to judge. So after the limerence stage has ended, couples in longer term relationships, so that after the 3-year mark, getting into the 7-year mark, things like that, they say it's less than twice a week. So 1 point something is the kind of the average. Once you get into even longer term relationships, so we talked about stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 kind of a relationship. When you get into longer term, it's usually less than a couple times a month. It's kind of by average. That being said, I don't like to use words like, normal or what's good or correct, because I think, as long as you and your partner are both happy, that's all that matters. The actual quantity is a moot point, as long as you're both satisfied. That being said, if someone comes in and they're saying, I have a higher libido, or my partner has a higher libido, and that's causing issues, then obviously you're not satisfied, and then we need to dig into that. And that, I would say, is a very, very common thing. Probably one of the most common things that I see in my office is one partner has a higher libido than the other, and then trying to traverse those waters, because it does not feel good to get rejected over and over again, or to be the only partner who's initiating over and over again, right? And it also doesn't feel good to be the partner that has to say no all the time or try to avoid that type of intimacy. That's also harmful for the relationship. So it's a sticky road.
Yeah, and it's whoever was in the beginning of the relationship tends to be the person that is going to be initiating through the relationship, don't you find? Or how would you kind of have people be more aware of initiating more, sharing the responsibility for initiating? Not that it's a responsibility, but it is a health habit. And, yeah, preventative to the relationship too, so it's important, right?
It is important. I 100% agree. And I think, yeah, getting into the pattern where one person is always initiating is not a great pattern to be in. So I usually have those conversations with my clients, like, who does most of the initiation? How does that make you feel? Are you happy with that pattern? Would you like to tweak that pattern? And I think sometimes the baby steps on that can be helpful. So I'll get clients to use things like code words or behaviors. So code word or behavior would be a way for one person to initiate, or both partners to initiate, where they're on the same page. So for instance, I have a couple that they have little children, so they can't verbalize too much. So he'll come home and he'll say something like, "Hey honey, are we having something spicy for dinner?" And that's his way of saying, like, "How you doing? Are we putting the kids to bed early tonight?" And if she's like, "We're having lasagna," it's like, "Don't touch me. The kids were little shits. Like, this is not gonna happen. I'm exhausted." And then they both kind of like laugh it off. And he knows not to get the expectation or goal out there. And she knows later, if he comes in for a cuddle or a snuggle or a kiss on the neck, he knows that it's not going farther than that. So she'll still embrace the intimacy versus pushing him away because she's worried that he's gonna take it to a step or a step farther that she's not ready for. I have another couple where she doesn't feel comfortable initiating in general. So normally she gets up, she puts on her nice work clothes, and she goes to work. Now she comes home, the first thing she does is, you know, uncomfortable work clothes come off, hair goes in a ponytail, and she starts making dinner. She puts some jogging pants on. But on days where she's really craving more intimacy, she'll leave her nice work clothes on and she'll start making dinner. Now he comes home and he sees that she's still in her work attire, and that's his indicator that she's really looking for more intimacy, but she's not necessarily comfortable initiating. So instead of, you know, turning on the TV and, you know, ignoring and grabbing a beer, he'll go into the kitchen, maybe open a bottle of wine, give her a long hug. "Honey, how was your day? What can I help with in the kitchen?" And now that dance of intimacy has begun, and it can be done throughout the entire evening versus, you know, her just putting it out there, "So are we going to go to bed and have sex now?" You know? So I think we often forget that that dance of intimacy can die in long-term relationships, and we really need to infuse that. And how can we infuse that? What is that dance that's still occurring? I think that's important.
Good. And I just have one question here from Julie, and she's wondering, how do you know you're good at oral sex?
Well, that is a great question. I think, like we talked about before when we were talking about the sexual schemas, you can have tons of tips and techniques under your belt, but if you don't necessarily know what your partner's primary schema is, those tips and techniques might not work. That being said, the only way to really be a Casanova or an amazing lover, whether it's oral sex or not, is good communication. Because what works for one is not going to work for another. What feels good for one is not going to feel good for another. So unless you can communicate with your partner faster, slower, would you like this, harder, can I bring in this toy? Unless you can communicate those things, you're not going to be an amazing oral sex giver or lover in general. I also think that tenacity plays a massive role. So the new book that we mentioned, I wrote, the website's called Heads Up. Yeah, the website's called headsupbook.com. You can check it out. And in that book, we talk about things like tenacity, how important it is to have that want or desire to show your partner how into it you are. I think that's one of the 3 key components to give good oral sex, or to know that you're good at giving oral sex. And one of them is it's all about the attitude. That's a very important part.
So Teesha, just so I'm aware of our time here, how does somebody get a hold of you that, you know, wants to come see you?
Yes, they can check out my website. So it's teeshamorgan.com. And I have a private practice in Vancouver and see couples and individuals. So they can give the office a ring and come see me anytime.
Great. And so, yeah, I just thank you so much. There's so much information, and you can see how this topic can just fly by. I can't believe we're almost out of time. Just want to say thank you so much for volunteering your time today, and tell everybody thank you for joining us on the call and through the series. So, that's it for this week, actually. So happy practicing with your new ideas around sex and sensuality. It is Valentine's Day this coming Sunday, so I hope you'll put all of these tips that Teesha has generously shared into practice. And this is the month of the heart, so just to let you know as well, Maureen McAvoy will be here next week, and she'll be sharing ways that you can get the love you need. So whether you're single or in a relationship, how do you kind of be intentional in your life to have that loving life you really, really want? And so I'm looking forward to that as well. And by the way, if you have missed the past 3 weeks, you can also purchase these online through this link here. And it's only $49. That gives you access to the full archive anytime you want, all your life long. So you can revisit these as much as you want. And the profits from that will go to the not-for-profit Dress for Success, who is, they're making such a difference for women who are, I was reading a story about a woman that, single mom that came out of, her marriage and, really was kind of left, basically with her kids, and they helped her engage a new career and feed her family, really. And that was through all of the resources that are made available through Dress for Success. So it's a great cause. Anyway, thanks for being with us today. And Teesha, thank you. So fun. Great.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Teesha, that was great.
You were such a good interviewer, Jo-Anne.
Really? Thank
I don't know
you.
how you do it, because I know you have a list of questions, but when I'm talking and I'm going on my random tirades and left, right, you still stick with me. So you're still listening to what I'm saying to ask follow-up questions, but then you have a list of questions to go to. So I don't know how you do two things at once, because I'd be all over the place.
Thanks a lot. It's fun, actually. I'm kind of, I feel like I'm getting better each week, but when I first started, it was just like, and I had like notes printed up on my computer that I was kind of like, looking over. It's like, so I'm starting to feel a bit of a flow and just really enjoying it more, which is always a good sign. But you know what? You're fabulous to interview. Really. Yeah, because you know what? You're clear in giving the answers and so engaging and personable. And well, anyway, but I just love you anyway. Yeah.
Thank you. You're so sweet.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you have a big long day now? Do you have a bunch of clients today?
No, I've had a lot of the day off, actually, because I'm preparing for tonight. And I think I'm seeing 2 clients this afternoon, and that's it. So
Nice.
yeah, I'm looking forward to tonight, and we'll have a bite to eat and have a few drinks or something. Sound good?
Yeah. Okay, so you said it's 7, right? Starts at 7.
Starts at 7, and it's in the building. So it's right on the, it's the senior center, and it's the audiovisual room. So it's like the first, point of the West Van Community Center.
Okay.
And it's right there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And bring me your book, okay? Because I'm going to actually hold it up and introduce you as well, and let people know that they can get it, and mention that you were interviewed this morning, and that we did this. And so, yeah, okay?
Okay, will do.
And also, I want to buy your book too. I want to be one of the first. I forgot to mention about your parents buying the book. I was going to mention that as a funny story.
Yeah. No,
well. Yeah.
Okay, well, see you tonight. Good luck on your talk.
Thanks a lot. See you later. Bye.
Figure out how to close this.
Oh, I think